fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Now on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Here's your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome back this week to the Patrick Riggins Show. The one show on the radio providing you with a clear-cut solution to the problems our country faces. Less government. That's it. That's the golden arrow that would fix a multitude of problems. Thank you for joining me again this week here on our news station, News Talk 98.7. We have a substitute teacher this week. We have a substitute producer, Micah, sitting in the other room in there. How's it going? I think Jay, isn't he reporting for probation or something like that? I can't give him too hard of a time because he will be back next week. And then nothing I'm doing will work because ultimately behind the glass, they control the show.
That's right.
All right. Again, welcome to the show. And we are providing the solution for the problems our country's facing. Your taxes are too high, less government. There's the solution. Too many regulations, less government. Economy not doing too well, less government. That is the aspirin for our country, a cure for what ails us. And each week we are here bringing you the information, the ammunition you need to rebut the people in your life who seek government solutions to everything, even to problems that don't really exist. But the government says they do, and that's good enough for them. This week I want to kind of jump right into it. I've talked about how we need to stay out of this big problem in Syria and the problems they're experiencing over there. And unfortunately, it really falls on deaf ears. Not that the White House is actually listening to this show. They should. If they would, they would just be perpetually reelected. But, even the conservative commentators I've listened, and they're saying that we need to go over there and stick our noses into Syria's business. And the reason I bring this back up is I ran across this story on Friday that the Obama administration, they denounced Russia for providing Syrian President Bashar Assad, providing his regime with anti-ship missiles. And their statement was saying the weapons would only worsen a war that Washington and Moscow have been promising to work together on stopping. Now remember, or maybe you don't know if you aren't a regular listener to this show, Russia has naval bases in Tartus, which is in Syria, if you couldn't guess from those contextual clues. So Russia has a reason to keep the current administration in Syria in power, or at least help them out in order to try and stabilize their country where Russia's bases are located. Now, General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he criticized what he called an, quote, unfortunate decision that will embolden the regime and prolong the suffering. And he spoke at a news conference after the New York Times reported that Russia recently delivered an advanced version of an anti-ship cruise missile to Syria. Dempsey went on to say it's ill-timed and very unfortunate, and Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel also urged Russia to rethink its military aid. He said that the U.S. and Russia both wanted to stabilize Syria after more than 2 years of civil war, but the Kremlin's military support makes that situation even more dangerous. So Russia should rethink its military aid. This is what Washington's saying. This, while our country sends over $110 million in aid to the Syrian rebels, plus at least $60 million in February and $45 million last September. And that's just what we know about. That's not counting covert aid going over there. We have military people advising the rebels from bases in Jordan. And there's rumors circulating that we are actually in country in Syria, helping them there as well. But Russia needs to rethink its military aid. Russia, who has naval bases located in that country, while we send aid but have no bases, no real legitimate reason to support either side in this conflict. Now, Hagel went on to say, what we don't want to see happen, what we don't want to see happen, the Russians don't want to see happen either. And that's for Syria to erupt to the point where we may well find a regional war in the Middle East. He went on to say, so we continue to work with the Russians on their interests and everything we can do to convince the powers that are involved in the region to be careful with escalation of military options and equipment. He also added that the U.S. was planning for every military contingency. Again, I'll say, we are actively supporting one of the sides in this conflict. We are there. So basically, we're telling everyone not to do what we are already doing. And we wonder why we have lost just about all respect in this world. Now, for the Obama administration, the anti-ship missiles are the second such worrying report in as many weeks at a time when Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, I believe that's how you pronounce that, they say they were coordinating closely to try to get Syria's government and the rebels into the start of some sort of peace negotiation. They are hoping the talks begin next month in Geneva. Yeah, that's going to work. Peace talks. When both sides are just so mad at each other and have major military countries feeding them both weapons and advice. You know, Russia is, obviously feeding Syria weapons, as we just said, and I'm sure they're sending them covert aid as well, just like we're doing with the Syrian rebels. Yet we say they're doing the wrong thing, but we're doing the right thing. Now, almost immediately after last week's announcement of a new peace push, Israeli officials warned that Moscow was preparing to give Assad state-of-the-art ground-to-air missile systems in the coming months. Now, both sets of missiles would only add to the administration's reservations as it evaluates a range of options, including military ones, of course, to break the stalemate in Syria's civil war and respond to evidence that Assad's forces used small amounts of chemical weapons in 2 attacks in March. Now, the cruise missiles and the surface-to-air batteries would significantly upgrade the Assad regime's capacity to target manned planes, drones, and incoming missiles. Successful Israeli strikes in recent weeks on weapons convoys to Hezbollah show the Syrian defenses are still far from impregnable, but the new weaponry would make it harder for United States to consider enforcing a no-fly zone in the country or otherwise intervening militarily. Well, there you go. If we aren't planning on sending planes and ships or troops into this conflict, then why would we be worried about new weaponry in the area? So that tells you right there, we do plan on sending planes, ships, and probably troops into this conflict when we really have no reason to do so. Dempsey also warned specifically about these surface-to-air missiles, saying they provide Syria with defenses at higher altitude and longer range and with better tracking capability. He's quoted as saying it pushes the standoff distance a little more, increases risk, but it's not impossible to overcome, he told reporters. So he's still leaving the door open. He still wants to go over there. He also said, what I really worry about is that Assad will decide that he's got these systems, he's somehow safer and more prone to miscalculation. Now, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and you can listen to it on our YouTube archives at youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. You just go back a couple of weeks for the segment labeled Syria. But this is just one more conflict where we don't need to be meddling in. And when Russia does something to protect the bases, protect its legitimate interest there in Syria, we get all in a huff about it because we're wanting to go in there militarily. Yet another country in the Middle East where we don't really need to be sticking our nose into. All right, we're up on the first break here on the Patrick Riggins Show on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. I'll be sure and put that in there. And when we come back, we've got just a huge show. It's very packed. We'll talk about, of course, the IRS scandal, maybe some stuff about free speech, war, and we'll not even get into the drug war a little bit more. I got into it a little bit last week, and we may hit on that again before the show's out. So stay with us this hour for the Patrick Riggins Show. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.